Welcome to Atlanta Motor Speedway here on NASCAR.com. I'm Doug Rice, joined by Brad Gilley, and we're about set to bring you around 3 hours of practice for all three of NASCAR's major series here at a lovely day in Hampton, Georgia at Atlanta Motor Speedway.
And this is a beautiful day, Doug. In fact, you and I just left the infield to come around to the other side of the track to watch the practice here today and covered on NASCAR.com. And the great thing, we drove in this morning from our hotel in Fayetteville, Georgia. It was foggy out. The air was kind of heavy. And lo and behold, as the day starts to go on, the sun is shining brightly on the racetrack. In fact, it's in the mid-70s right now here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And it's looking like down in the garage, we're starting to get a little bit of activity. But as you can see, we still have the safety vehicles on the racetrack blowing it off. It was damp this morning, not necessarily very wet, but there have been a lot of rains here in Georgia to kind of get things wet. So they're going to make sure they get everything completely dry, completely blowed off. And we are going to get to practice here for about 90 minutes or so.
And we're looking right now, that looks like it's going to be Chase Elliott getting ready to go out and practice. And Brad, we had a briefing this morning from some NASCAR officials about the particulars that we will see on these Cup cars this weekend. This is the first iteration of the so-called new package for NASCAR.
Yeah, and to simplify things, essentially the new package now has an 8-inch rear spoiler up from about 2.5 inches. It has a 2-inch kick out on the front splitter, which was about 1/4 of an inch before, and the radiator pan, which is essentially where the splitter goes back underneath the car, is much longer, much wider than it was in years past, and the whole idea of that is to create more downforce. The other part of this package, which is going to be run on tracks 1 1/3 and bigger, is the fact that the engine horsepower is reduced via a tapered spacer. So what was 750 horsepower when we were here last year is going to be now dropped down to 550 horsepower. There is one other change to the cars, but we'll really see it next week at Las Vegas Motor Speedway with what they call the drag ducts on the front of the car, where they vent air from the nose of the car out through right in front of the front tires. Now at Atlanta, Homestead, Miami, Darlington, and Pocono, they're not running the drag ducts. Instead, they're allowing them to run brake ducts in the car because braking is heavy here. That being said, the brake ducts, you have to have the holes and everything, but you can cover them up.
So we'll see how this affects it. One of the things that really jumped out at me walking through the garage earlier this morning is the size of the spoiler on these cars. They're humongous. They're 8 inches tall. They are so tall that the top 2.5 inches on these spoilers is clear Lexan. And that way it allows the drivers, you can see it right there on the back of the car pulling out of the garage, that allows the drivers to actually see through the spoiler. If it wasn't, they would have no ability to use their rear view mirror to watch things coming up from behind them. And it looks like most of the safety vehicles are about to head off the track, and we ought to be getting practice underway here very shortly. It might be pretty close to time. 11:35 was the scheduled time to drop the flag on practice.
Yeah, that is very true. The other thing to consider with the 2.5 inches of clear Lexan, it's not just about seeing behind you, but it's also seeing the car in front of you. If a driver is going to come onto pit road, they're going to be making hand signals saying that, hey, I'm coming onto pit road. With that 8-inch spoiler, you would likely not see the driver in front of you and whatever he is signaling to be able to do on the racetrack. And, well, as we saw last week at Daytona with one of our cautions, then you never know how that's going to go. We don't want to see anyone actually running into each other as they're coming onto pit road.
And we're being told that they're getting ready to push cars out onto pit road, so we're going to be very close to the mark of getting practice started on time here today at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Appreciate you tuning in, listening, and watching here on NASCAR.com. Brad and I'll be busy this weekend broadcasting for the Performance Racing Network, but nice to come over here to the TV compound and watch this from a little bit different perspective. You see the clouds there in the picture. It has been lightening up throughout the day. As Brad said earlier, when we rolled in early this morning, there was a lot of cloud cover. You couldn't even see the grandstands and the condo buildings here at AMS from the infield, but all that fog is burned off, and we're going to be ready to go practicing. Seeing Dillon lined up there on the pit road, ready to go out behind Joey Logano. That's a young man that had a great run down at Daytona, Brad.
Yeah.
Come home 6th place, highest finishing Chevrolet.
Well, and look at this. You've got not only Ty Dillon, but also Michael McDowell behind him, who had a top 5 run at Daytona. And what's unusual about this, typically we see the first cars, the top cars in points. They're the ones that are going to get to roll out for practice first. That's where these drivers sit right now based on where they finished in the Daytona 500. And we're hearing now the track is hot, and you can see some more action in the garage. But as Ty Dillon is rolling off a pit road, in front of him Joey Logano, Michael McDowell out there ready to go. There are other cars in the garage still making their final adjustments before they get out there on the track. But this would be very interesting, Doug, because I think we're going to see 2 different things in practice here. Number one, we're going to see cars just simply going out there making a single car run. On a very fresh set of tires, I would think that's most likely what they're going to do, because the tires drop off very quickly here on this abrasive track. Once they get their car set up for what they might be doing in qualifying, or at least find that raw speed, then I have a feeling we're going to actually see a lot of packs going out there and maybe doing just a little bit of drafting.
So we'll watch as Ty Dillon gets up to speed here on his first lap of the day, coming off a 6th-place run in the Daytona 500. Career best finish for Ty. Had a chance to talk with him pretty extensively on Daytona Media Day. He's a different guy right now. He is approaching this season like he was so stressed last year about not performing at an extremely high level, and he decided, I'm just going to enjoy this. I'm a cup driver. I'm getting to race on Sundays, and I'm going to relax and enjoy the moment. And I bet that's going to pay off for him on the racetrack, not quite being so uptight, so worried about his finishing order every week. And those finishes will come.
Yeah, I agree. And it seemed like he also had a different type of focus this year. You know, last year he was very concerned with going out there and driving well, but also doing what I think drivers need to do in this business, especially if you've got a company like Geico supporting you. Go out there and promote your own brand, and a lot of things that he was doing with vlogs on his YouTube videos, which was a lot of fun to watch. But it seems like there's a little more of a determination in his focus this year, in that, you know, hey, I'm tired of running in the 20s. You know, let's get up and go. And Germain Racing, which has had a technical alliance with Richard Childress Racing in the offseason, they actually moved onto the campus of Richard Childress Racing in Welcome, North Carolina. And I had the opportunity to talk to Ty's crew chief, Matt Borland, earlier this week, and he says that's a huge payoff. Just being able to walk around the campus, and inevitably you're going to run into an engineer for RCR or someone else, and, you know, you're just going to kind of talk and exchange info. He said just that exchange of info, just physically being there, is so much better for them right now than when their shop was in Mooresville, probably an hour away?
Joey Logano out on the racetrack now, and looks like he's taking his time down on the apron of the racetrack before he comes up and goes up to speed. Very much a contender in the Daytona 500. Joey's going to come back onto the racetrack, it looks like. Came close to maybe grabbing his second 500. Didn't get the push he wanted from Michael McDowell late in the race, and expressed his displeasure about that. And McDowell basically said, hey, it's not my job to push Joey Logano to the front.
No, it's not. And in fact, Michael said, if that was my best opportunity to win, I was going to do that. I would have pushed him, but Logano was thinking, hey, we're Ford teammates, you know, be a good guy, help me out. But Matt Borland had pointed out, or not Matt Borland rather, but talking to Michael McDowell's crew chief, Drew Blickensderfer, he said, look, they didn't let us know when they were pitting during the race. You know, there was a lot of laps when maybe Joey could have pushed us as well, and he didn't. So we're here to run our race. They're there to run their race. If we can help each other, great. But when the checkered flag is about to wave, you've got to do what's best for number one.
Easily the most popular guy here at Atlanta Motor Speedway this weekend, Chase Elliott, NASCAR's most popular driver to begin with. But you couple that with the fact that we're in Hampton, Georgia, not all that far from Dawsonville. I've got a good feeling that the crowd that's going to be here Sunday overwhelmingly will be supporting the driver of the number 9 here, and a little bit of extra pressure, I think, on Chase when he comes to this place. You're only here once a year.
Right.
One time a year you get a chance to flash in front of your home state fans.
Well, a top 10 finish last year here at Atlanta for Chase Elliott. He was actually the 10th place finisher in this race, and I know a lot of Chase Elliott fans waited a long time for him to get that first win, probably no one more so than Chase Elliott himself. When he did that last year at Watkins Glen, then it seemed like they just came in rapid succession. Of course, a big win for him at Dover last year, which was a great thing, and Kansas did very well for him. 2 years ago, Chase had a top 5 finish here, and I think before he got that win, every time you come to Atlanta, you think, wouldn't it be a great story if? And wouldn't it be a great story if that first win came here at Atlanta Motor Speedway? And unfortunately it didn't, but it still did come for him.
Ryan Newman announced his new sponsorship, and now here's Daniel Hemrick rolling out, who has gone to the top of the speed charts here very early on in practice at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Brad, it looks like so far only 9 cars have posted time, so not a big land rush to get out here quickly. I'm hoping by the end of this practice today, we can see the cars maybe line up and try to get into some drafting.
I haven't, if you look at what they're doing, Daniel Hemrick just made 3 laps out on the racetrack. Michael McDowell made 1 single lap. You look at the 12 of Ryan Blaney, he made 2 laps on the racetrack, and Joey Logano made 2 laps. Bubba Wallace has gone out for a couple laps. The only driver that's made more than 3, well, actually, there's 2 of them now. We see Alex Bowman, who is 7th quick on the speed chart, and his teammate, Chase Elliott, who is 9th quick. A little bit of a theme there. The Hendrick cars have gone 4 laps. The Penske cars have gone 2 or 3 laps each. I think we're seeing a kind of a team organizational plan going on.
What you're trying to do right now is also establish data points and see what tire wear is going to be and combine all of this, because these teams are working in concert with each other right now. Just as you pointed out, Brad Keselowski out on the racetrack here, former NASCAR champion. Looks like he's carrying the colors of Auto Trader this weekend here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I think they're usually on the different Penske cars a couple of times throughout the season. It's Brad drops back down onto the apron here. We were kind of inspecting the track earlier today, Brad, and you noticed there's a lot. They have put a lot of tar and sealer into the cracks of this place. It looks like a place that had been painted and the paint cracked, and they had to go back in and do a lot of repair. They were very busy here this winter at AMS.
What you see is that road tar, essentially, when you're watching it on your screen, and you can see it right now as Clint Boyer is making his way around the racetrack. Last year, a top 5 finish for him. What you don't see from these camera angles is just how big those gaps are. They were going to repave Atlanta Motor Speedway a couple of years ago, and the drivers really did a good job of convincing Speedway Motorsports Incorporated, the company that owns Atlanta, no, we want a track that wears the tires out. We want to have fun. And SMI said, oh, okay, that's great. We're going to have to do a lot of repair work on this track and filling those cracks, which some of them, 2-3-inch wide cracks on the racetrack. It's pretty incredible what you see, but there's been a lot of work just to maintain this racing surface. It's what the drivers wanted. We'll see how it turns out this year with the new aerodynamic and the new engine package on the race car. I'm looking forward to it. I love this track, and you go back and look at the history of Atlanta Motor Speedway, Doug. You look at some of the closest finishes in the history of our sport. They happened here. Kevin Harvick, his first career victory back in 2001 against Jeff Gordon, which was almost a mirror finish of the year before when Dale Earnhardt beat Bobby Labonte. You can look at Carl Edwards' first win. You talk about he and Jimmie Johnson just going head-to-head against each other. Carl's bouncing off the wall. They're doing everything they can to fight each other and go out there and go to victory lane. And all of these finishes, were within thousandths of a second of each other, and some of the best and closest in the history of our sport. I'm hoping this new aero package helps deliver that this weekend.
Well, I saw one of the most thrilling races ever, and Mark Arrow had a great call on it when Dale Earnhardt won here by about a foot.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of excitement, and we've seen a spat of big finishes. Now, last year, Kevin Harvick just decimated the field here. Had a chance this morning at our hotel. Derek Cope is staying there, so ran into him down in the lobby this morning and chatted with Derek for a good bit. And basically, I was trying to find out, why is Harvick so good here? And Derek was telling me because he runs this track different than anyone else, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when Kevin rolls out onto the track. But some pretty fascinating insights there from Derek Cope, who's a bright guy. I know a lot of people don't talk about him except the fact that he won a Daytona 500 and a race up at Dover. But when you get next to him, and last couple of weeks I've had a couple of chances to chat with him. Very insightful information. Boy, that looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Nice bright blue sky. A lot of action in the garage right now as Austin Dillon is getting his car out and to go out there and practice. Of course, we see Clint Boyer fastest, his teammate Eric Almirola second quick, then the RCR number 8 car of Daniel Hemrick is third. Wood Brothers is fourth quick with Paul Menard, and the number 20 of Erik Jones, fifth quick.
And we were talking about Kevin Harvick, and lo and behold, he rolls the Buschmobile out onto the racetrack. But what Derek said that Harvick does better than anyone else is back off going into the corners. He lets off the gas a lot sooner than anyone else, and that allows him, ironically enough, to go through the corners faster, because his braking point is different, and then he is able to get back on the gas quicker at the exit of the corner.
last year there was a lot of talk, and of course we had the full 750 horsepower on these cars when they were racing here last year, not the 550 that we have this year, but you would see him letting off almost at the flag stand. He would go down into turn one and put those two left side tires just underneath the line, and the line at the bottom of the racetrack is literally an angle. It goes from about maybe 5 degrees of banking on the apron straight to 24 degrees of banking on the racetrack, and he has found a way to sort of hook those left side tires right on that line and power through, and like you said, get back to the gas way quicker than anybody else.
And I asked Erik, I said, well, why doesn't everybody else do that? And he goes, everybody else is not Kevin Harvick. Well, okay, good answer.
If you remember back, NASCAR had a big production day back in January at the NASCAR Hall of Fame and Convention Center in downtown Charlotte, and we were asking Kevin Harvick about that because another thing that NASCAR has done is they've required the teams to share data, some of their telemetry with some of the other race teams, the on-throttle, the off-throttle, things that they can measure now with the electronic fuel injection system. And I said, Kevin, do you worry that that gives away your secrets and all of that? He goes, yeah, there's a little bit about that, but he said, not everyone's driving my car, though. They can look at where I'm lifting. They can look at where I'm getting back into the gas, but not everyone's driving a car that's been prepared by my crew chief, Rodney Childers, and for him, that's the difference, and I thought that was a great confidence that he has in his team as well.
And we just saw Martin Truex Jr. out onto the racetrack. I think that car may give me a little bit of trouble Sunday when we start calling the live action of putting Truex into the 19. That's a dramatic departure from where he had been, and one of Brad's favorite folks in the universe, Erik Jones, out on the racetrack.
Erik Jones, and he's basically back out on the racetrack as well. If you look at the laps right now, and I know you can see this on your screen as well, if you're also following timing and scoring here on NASCAR.com, Erik Jones now has turned his 9th lap in practice. No one else has come close to that. Joey Logano has turned 5 laps in this practice session. A handful of drivers have turned 4 and 3. A lot of them have turned 2 or maybe just one single lap like Michael McDowell has and Austin Dillon as well. But Joey Logano is back out on the racetrack. I'm kind of surprised, Doug, to see them get back on the track this quick. We have a 90-minute practice session here. It's almost like they went out there on the fresh tires, shook the cars down, and now they went out there and maybe made an adjustment or two, and they're getting back out pretty quick.
I think some of this may have been the first couple of laps were just to scuff in the tires, and then they come back out, and they'll get a better reading for their cars in more like race trim than what they would before. Shout-outs to a couple of people that are watching and listening to our coverage here today on NASCAR.com. Jesse Rose, thanks a lot for tuning in, and also Matt Carter says, I'm enjoying the stream with you calling the action in practice. Well, glad to make your day here on a Friday, Matt.
Yeah, and by the way, someone asked, Jesse said, how I wish there was a timer to see how much time was left in practice. I'll tell you this first practice session does go to 12:55 Eastern time, so it is a 90-minute practice session. Caleb Whistler, thank you for tuning in as well. We appreciate that. A lot of fun doing this here on the live stream on NASCAR.com. And to be able to just see the cars on the track again here at Atlanta and know that we're coming here with something different. Again, this track has the ability to run from the bottom to the top. What the cars can do on this track is what remains to be seen. And I think the fact that the cars are a little bit slower on the straightaways, maybe carrying a little bit more speed through the corners, but have so much more downforce on them right now, I have a feeling, and we're seeing a lot of drivers run the middle of the racetrack, a lot of drivers maybe even running a higher groove in the racetrack. I have a feeling, Doug, that they're going to use up pretty much from the outside safer barrier to the yellow line down at the bottom all weekend.
Well, that's one of the things you get to do here at AMS is use the entire racetrack. It's unlike any other track, and I know a lot of people love to hang the label cookie-cutter racetracks on all the mile-and-a-half racetracks. This mile-and-a-half racetrack couldn't be any more different than a Texas Motor Speedway or a Kansas or a Charlotte Motor Speedway, just by the way that it chews up tires, the way the transitions go in the turns. It is dramatically different. By the way, if you'd like to tweet us, you can do so, and we will do our best to respond to you. Doug Rice is at Riceman61, and Brad Gilly is simply at Brad Gilly. Man, that's easy. I couldn't get my own name.
Well, I'm sorry about that. It's a Gillie, but it is. We were talking about this pavement. it was last repaved back in 1997, in between the spring and the fall race. So Dale Jarrett went to victory lane in the spring race. They not just repaved it, they reconfigured it. It used to be a true oval. Then they put in the double dog leg. Came back, Bobby Labonte went to victory lane, but was talked more about back then, Doug, was Jeffrey Bodine putting up a lap of 197.5 miles per hour. This was back in 1997. More recently, last year, for example, the pole qualifying lap was 184 miles per hour for this race here. And we are seeing speeds right now, maybe about 4 miles per hour slower, but that's really relative.
That's
because
negligible.
Yeah, it is.
By the way, that 197 by Jeffrey Bodine there was on Hoosier tires. That was at the height of the tire wars.
That's right.
When Goodyear and Hoosier were bringing different tire compounds and different teams would pick what they wanted, and Jeff came down here, slapped a set of Hoosiers on there, and almost pegged it out at the 200-mile-an-hour mark.
There's our Daytona 500 champion, Denny Hamlin. It's been a lot of fun to watch his social media here the last week because obviously the feel-good story of that is after the loss of J.D. Gibbs about a month or so ago. We all know J.D. Gibbs, number 11 was his number all throughout sports growing up. Denny Hamlin had the number 11. J.D. was really instrumental in bringing Denny Hamlin over to Joe Gibbs Racing. But, you know, winning the Daytona 500, hearing Coach Joe Gibbs say, look, I've won 3 Super Bowls, I've won championships and Daytona 500s in the sport. This is the win that means the most to me in my life right now. And everything that surrounds it, the emotion and everything that they've had to do has been really special. As the week has gone on, Denny Hamlin has also focused a lot on the fact that he is not a Daytona 500 winner. He is a 2-time Daytona 500 champion.
I think Denny Hamlin punched his ticket to the NASCAR Hall of Fame with that win. 32 wins now, I believe, and 2 Daytona 500 victories. Those are Hall of Fame numbers, even without a championship, which I think almost gets you in automatically. For Hamlin, those kind of numbers, that's a Hall of Fame career in my book.
I would agree with you. And when it comes to the talent of Denny Hamlin, I almost think he's underrated in a lot of people's minds. But let's look at where Denny Hamlin has won. He has won on the short tracks of Martinsville and Bristol Motor Speedway. He has won on the 1-mile tracks of Phoenix and New Hampshire. He has won at Darlington a couple of times in the Southern 500. He has won on 1.5-mile tracks from Texas to Homestead, Miami to right here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. He has won at Pocono, a flat 2.5-mile track. He's won at Chicagoland Speedway, a road course win at Watkins Glen, multiple wins at Richmond, and, of course, the Daytona 500.
Kyle Larson out on the racetrack right now, and this was my surprise to the bad last year with this 42 team. I thought this guy was a mortal lock to go out and win 3 or 4 races and contend solidly for the championship. They ran really well maybe in the first third of the season and then tailed off. If there's a team that should break out, we've already seen one. Denny Hamlin already has his win.
Right.
Let's see if the diminutive Kyle Larson can come to the front. So.
Yeah. You know what? You're completely right, because that's the other thing. Denny Hamlin broke the winless streak. Kyle Larson, though, so close. Runner-up finish at Fontana, runner-up finish at Bristol, at Pocono, at Chicagoland Speedway last year. Both Bristol races, the runner-up finisher. The inaugural race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in September. Top 2, top 3 finishes for Kyle Larson. He had an abundance of them in 2018, just not that trip to victory lane. And that McDonald's paint scheme, they just revealed that earlier this week and talked about how McDonald's was going to be on his race car this year. I'm a big fan, actually. I like that. I think they did a good job.
McDonald's or you like the paint scheme?
Well, both, but I really like the paint scheme. Hey, I'm still a kid at heart.
It's kind of cool. It looks more Hot Wheelish than some of the paint schemes.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's why you like it so much.
Well, back in the day when my kids were young, when Bill Elliott was driving the McDonald's car, the number 94, you would get the Happy Meals. And not only this was the best thing for me as a dad, when my son was too young to do this, you would get the Bill Elliott Hot Wheels, and it came as like a red car with some black accents.
Yeah.
But all the decals you got to put on yourself.
Sweet.
And, so I was trying to make it perfect. When my son got older, then he was just sticking stickers on there randomly.
You didn't scam his Hot Wheels, did you, from McDonald's? I mean,
up to a point.
You take them for yourself?
Well, but when he got into them and wanted to use them himself, then sure. But yeah, Daniel Hemrick back out on the racetrack right now, 8th quickest. This is the second time that he's been on the track in his Alsco car, and Good-looking race car, number 8. They had a fairly decent speed weeks going throughout most of speed weeks, and obviously, as it did for a lot of other people, Daniel Hemrick's day didn't end the way exactly that they wanted to, but really neat to see them have a lot of speed out of those race cars, and I am very curious to see what happens out of the Richard Childress Racing stable this year, Doug. Just simply based on the fact that Hemrick and Austin Dillon, a couple of younger drivers, Hemrick in the Cup races in which he has run, I mean, he was the guy that we talked about throughout most of the Roval weekend last year at Charlotte. We know he's got a lot of talent, still looking for that first big NASCAR win, but as a rookie, very, very much looking forward to seeing what his potential is.
Interesting view here over the hood of the Daytona 500 winners. Denny Hamlin goes by the Ferris wheel on the backstretch here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. By the way, if you are thinking, here's an unabashed plug for the Speedway coming your way now, of making a trip to Hampton, Georgia this weekend. The weather, which really looked iffy earlier this week, Brad, the last forecast I've seen is Saturday and Sunday should be pretty beautiful.
Yeah, and it's not even just the beautiful part of it. Obviously, when you look at the forecast going into it, you look at it and say, is Mother Nature going to rain down on us? It looks like that's all clearing up, but the other good part of it is the temperature. I mean, as you and I were driving from the infield to the front side of the racetrack, just before we came on here at NASCAR.com, you looked down at the radio in your car and said, it says it's 74 outside. Is that right? And it is. Wonderful temperature here.
Brad, I transposed tracks a minute ago. I was thinking Charlotte on the Hoosier tires. That was not those were good years here at Atlanta for the 197.
Okay.
Yeah, but there was some big speeds put up at Charlotte during the middle of those, and those were interesting times. That was one of the races they ran in the 600 at Charlotte, where every 5 laps you looked up and there was another car in the fence.
Right.
Because it was like 100 degrees. Guys were taking chances. And thankfully we don't have those occasions anymore. So my bad on that. Getting my tracks confused momentarily here as we're watching Denny Hamlin turn a couple of laps here at Atlanta Motor Speedway.
I love that view.
That's pretty slick, isn't it?
That is. The roof cam and the helmet cam, a great view. Kind of gives you, whoa, Joey Logano, little puff of something out of the back of his race car. I think he actually must have just run through something. But for a second there, it looked like it could be something disastrous for that Shell Pennzoil Team Penske number 22. But Logano out on the racetrack, our reigning series champion. And Doug, if we would for a minute, when we sat down and talked with Joey in downtown Charlotte, back in January, I think you probably described the observation that we all had the best way, just simply about how he's carrying himself as our reigning series champion.
I watched him at a press conference this year with all the Penske drivers. Keselowski was there, and Ryan Blaney, and Joey was there. And for the first time in my life, I saw Joey Logano kind of as the alpha male of the group.
Yeah.
Just the way he came into the room. He sort of ran the presser. He talked more than Brad, believe it or not. and Ryan Blaney never talks a lot anyway. But there's a difference, as you said about him, and that's what winning a championship does. It changes who you are. He's in the frat now. Not that he wasn't before, but he doesn't have to wear a pledge pin any longer.
He's always had the confidence in his ability. And Joey Logano came down to Atlanta. His family moved down here from Connecticut back when he was younger and getting into racing. He spent a lot of times running in their Thursday night shootout here with the Legends cars and the Bandoleros. Went up to Charlotte for the Tuesday night shootout. I watched Joey Logano at 12 years old up in Dodge City, Kansas. There's a great now dirt track there. It was an asphalt track at the time. Pro Division Nationals, 12 years old. Went out there and won that. And when Mark Martin had made the comment about Joey Logano, he's ready. He's ready for Cup now. Joey might have been 15 at the time. I thought back to when he was running that Legends car. And I mean, he looked like he'd been doing this his entire life. Well, I guess for a 12-year-old, he almost was at the time. But, I mean, the talent is there. The confidence has been there. But like you said, having that skin on the wall of the championship. And here's the Daytona 500 winner as well. But the championship, just there's a difference in him.
Makes a lot of difference.
Yeah.
We'll see how that spills over to this weekend. I've got to say for myself, maybe since they stopped having the last race of the season here at Atlanta Motor Speedway, because that used to be the finale. If everybody talks about maybe the greatest race ever was the 92 race here when Alan Kulwicki won his championship and you had 5 drivers showing up with a legitimate chance at the title.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most anticipated Atlanta race because of the changes that NASCAR is bringing to bear. 200 horsepower less, different aero configurations, and no one. The same answer you get from everybody is, I don't know. They don't know what's going to happen Sunday when you put 40 cars out here, we go racing.
Yeah. If we look at the rundown right now, as you're looking at the 77 car, that's, well, we're not looking at that right now. We're seeing a couple of different things here from the garage. But right now we're actually looking at Kyle Larson with his McDonald's Chevrolet, and Coca-Cola, of course, one of his big sponsors as part of the racing family. If we look at the rundown right now, Doug, it's a fairly even mix in a lot of ways. We've got a couple of Fords with Clint Boyer and Eric Almirola, the top two. Austin Dillon, third quick. Martin Truex Jr. and his Toyota, fourth quick. Joey Logano, the top five. Ty Dillon, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., seventh quick, followed by Daniel Hemrick, eighth. Paul Menard is ninth. 10th, Kyle Busch. And remember, some of these drivers have run anywhere from 13 laps to only a single lap on the racetrack. Denny Hamlin is 12th quick, followed by Kyle Larson. Erik Jones, 13th. Michael McDowell, 14th. Ryan Blaney is 15th. Bubba Wallace, 16th. 17th is Brad Keselowski. Alex Bowman, 18th. Jimmie Johnson, 19th. Chase Elliott is 20th. Kevin Harvick, 21st. Parker Kligerman, 22nd. 23rd is Chris Buescher. And those are the 23 drivers that have actually gone out there and taken a time so far. Things are pretty mixed up, but with the amount of lap time that gets dropped off with each lap that these cars run, I don't know how much movement we're going to see in the scoreboard. Maybe if they go out there on a fresher set of tires, because they've got 4 sets of tires for practice, a set of tires for qualifying, then they're going to have 12 sets of tires for the race. How their crew chiefs are managing that tire allotment here, it'll be interesting to see what happens, though, if they can actually pick up a little bit of speed during a draft. But I don't know that they're going to be able to do that here just because of the amount of lap time that falls off.
Chris Buescher getting ready to go out onto the speedway. JT Doherty Racing announced a pretty advanced scheme or plan this year to tie in all of their sponsors. They have different sponsors that they will put on the cars throughout the years, all of this being supported by Kroger and other groups of retailers. So they'll try to reflect the seasonal interest of each of their cars as they go out, as we see the 47 now getting ready to go out. Kurt Busch out on the racetrack in the number 1 machine for Ganassi Racing. That's another one that I'm going to have to really pay attention to Sunday when we start calling the action on PRN, because you always have that challenge every year when you change up the paint schemes. By the way, we're getting a lot of tweets and people making suggestions and things like that, and the best we can do, we'll pass along the observations to the folks here at NASCAR.com, and got to remember, this is the maiden voyage. So as we go through the year doing this, Brad, we were told earlier, there'll be tweaks and improvements and things like that. So this is day 1.
Yeah.
And it's a beta test here. So we ask for your indulgence just a wee bit here as we get running. But thanks a lot to all the folks that have tweeted to us. Jeremy Johnson, Ricky Matthews, Matt Carter. Appreciate you guys doing it. Now here's another car that will challenge a lot of folks, and that's Daniel Suarez in the 41.
This is the first Eris paint scheme for him in 2019. Of course, we're only 2 weeks into the year, but the good thing is some of the drivers that have changed car numbers have at least maintained their sponsors for the most part. Daniel Suarez said that most of the races he's going to run this year are going to be with the Haas Automation paint scheme, and maybe if they pick up other sponsorship there. But this is a new Eris paint scheme for 2019. That car back when he was at Joe Gibbs Racing, predominantly orange. I kind of like the orange and black look, though. I like that they're able to maintain somewhat of a theme of the paint scheme, say between the Eris and Haas paint scheme. You have one that's orange and black, you have the other one that's red and black, but at least when you look down at it, the cars still look pretty similar.
And now we're seeing Matt DiBenedetto roll out onto the racetrack here shortly, leaving the garage. Matt had a stellar run in the Daytona 500, and I think impressed a lot of people and caught a lot of attention. Well-deserved. We'll see if they can back it up this weekend. The one cautionary tale I'll say is teams go to Daytona sometimes, and they look like world beaters. And you come
Right.
here, and all of a sudden you find your place in the pecking order. Would like to see him run back up toward the front again. I think he's a guy that captures a lot of attention. He's very social media savvy and seems to have a pretty big following, Brad, for a guy that has never really had a chance to be in a front-running car.
Well, he's a fun guy. And look, if your middle name is Guido, that makes you even more fun. And that is true, by the way. The one thing at Daytona, and he led the most laps of any driver, 49 of the 207 laps that were run. But I thought to myself, okay, this is great. He's out front. What's going to happen when they come onto pit road? And if you remember the very first round of pit stops, he lost about 4 spots. It almost looked like he was a couple seconds slower than some of the top teams. With what they have moving to Toyota this year, his crew chief, Mike Wheeler, who was the crew chief for Denny Hamlin and a longtime crew chief over at Joe Gibbs Racing, I do think Levine Family Racing is going to be more up to speed than what they have been in the past. But it's not just about how fast your race car is on the racetrack. When you come down to pit road at those critical moments, and they're working on everything with that race team, and I'm not trying to throw down on the pit crew, but Joey Logano's pit crew versus Matt DiBenedetto's pit crew, there's a discrepancy right there, and I mean, that's just the reality.
Were you in my living room when I watched the 500? Because we had some friends over, and everybody was so excited, and I'm saying, here's where the tale gets told, though.
Right.
And a couple of times, you know, he would be leading, they'd come in, and then fourth off of pit road, and that's the cheapest real estate you can buy in racing is by having effective pit stops. As we're seeing Joey Logano get ready to go out for another run, I'm going to give some folks a shout out here if that's all right.
Please do.
Andy Pittman, thanks a lot for tuning in here today, and NASCAR is already responding to some of the folks saying thanks a lot for the feedback, but we're really glad you're watching. Ryan Azar, we appreciate you tuning in today, and U Jam is also saying, man, I'm loving watching practice on NASCAR.com. So we're glad that you're enjoying this. And also Brian Devereaux is tuned in today, so we appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Brian. We definitely appreciate that. Joey Logano, obviously, they're waiting for a clean spot on the racetrack, it looks like, or maybe waiting to see if another teammate comes up. I'm curious to see, and again, we do expect to see maybe a little bit of drafting come into play, similar to what we saw in the All-Star race in 2018. And if you got to go back and watch, NASCAR.com had fantastic coverage of the test out at Las Vegas Motor Speedway as well. We did see groups and packs of cars racing. Remember, while everything is the same on these race cars at Atlanta, mostly as to what we're going to have next week in Las Vegas, the one major difference are what they call the drag ducts. Next week, you'll see 2 big holes in the nose of the race car, which ducts and vents the air out to in front of the front tires. That punches a bigger hole in the air and just creates a different type of downforce, a different type of drag. Here they have brake ducts on the race car. So I think it even still remains to be seen if we're going to have drafting, what type that's going to be here. I don't expect it to be Daytona and Talladega drafting, but I think the restarts are going to be very incredible with this new 2019 package on tracks like Atlanta or Vegas or Texas or Charlotte, Kansas on down the road.
I want to see some drafting. I want to see some cars get out here and run nose to tail. At the bottom of all of this, folks, Brad Gilly and I are both big race fans. Yes, we get to announce racing for a living, but we are big fans of the sport, and I have been anxiously awaiting this weekend for a long time. I'm really curious to see what we're going to see when they roll out here Sunday, and we've got drivers driving with anger and determination. So that ought to be a spectacle. I'm hoping so. David Reagan there, who unfortunately had a fairly early exit from the 500, and Landon Castle out on the racetrack in the 00.
Yeah, and that would be the Starcom Racing team. We were talking earlier about Derek Cope. One thing I appreciate about some of these small, less budgeted teams, and I want to say that as nice as possible. A guy like Derek Cope is a guy who has built up this race team and has acquired charters and is saying, look, I'm actually going to have a legitimate race team. We're going to go out there and race every week, but they're also racing within their means. They're not trying to run themselves out of business financially, but they're also not coming here just trying to collect a paycheck. This is a team that seems to be working their way up the ladder. Landon Castle is a fantastic driver. You can credit him for a lot of the success that Hendrick Motorsports had early on when we first went to the Car of Tomorrow in the mid-2000s, because he was the guy testing those cars that Jimmie Johnson and Kyle Busch at the time and several other drivers were winning so many races in.
He's also a very funny guy. When you get a chance to talk to him,
yeah,
he can make you laugh. We chatted with him at both Daytona Media Day and the Charlotte Media Day, and he's very tech savvy too.
Yes,
If
he is.
you need somebody to help
Program your phone?
your computer or program your phone, find Landon Castle, because he can do that. And a lot of that is the exception in the driver ranks, that there's one of them that actually understands technology. Be curious to see what he is able to do here Sunday when we get ready to race for 500 miles. And once again, Joey Logano how many laps has he turned in here so far, Brad? He seems like he's been out there a lot.
He has come out on the racetrack quite a bit, actually. He's fifth quick right now. 13 laps is what he's turned. So far, the highest number of laps has been Denny Hamlin at a grand total of 21. So Joey Logano around the racetrack. You just saw a quick shot there of Ryan Newman. Of course, he over now at Roush Fenway Racing driving that number 6 car. Different paint scheme for Ryan Newman this week. Last week we saw the Oscar Mayer paint scheme, which he's going to run a lot. This week is the Acorns Ford, another financial company. They were actually just doing a press conference down in the media center a short while ago. But watching Joey Logano, and it's interesting to watch the line that he's making around the racetrack. Not quite down on the yellow line in turns 1 and 2, maybe about a car width up off the racetrack. A lot of times you see him down on the bottom in 1 and 2. Maybe they get to the top in 3 and 4. Tried to really hit the yellow line in 3 and 4 right there, but it almost looks like he's really making a qualifying run. And we did see him, Doug, if you remember, out there on pit road waiting for that nice open spot in the racetrack. But let's remember, too, that the tires that Joey is on, I'm assuming he's still running the same set of tires that he started practice with. Lap times are going to drop off, but he can still go out there and just try and make that fast run. It may not show it on the scoreboard, but what his crew chief Todd Gordon and all the engineers are looking at, they know what they're looking at based on the amount of laps that his car has run right now.
Top 5 fastest so far are Clint Boyer, and then it'll be Eric Almirola. Austin Dillon chimes in there next, and then it's going to be Martin Truex Jr. Joey Logano will be after that.
Yeah, and after Joey Logano, we see the number 41 car of Daniel Suarez, the 13 of Ty Dillon. Ty Dillon went out very early in this session and put up his lap of 178.384 miles per hour. And then the number 17 of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is 8th. The 8 of Daniel Hemrick is 9th. And Paul Menard in the Wood Brothers 21 is 10th. But what's interesting is to go out there and look at this. And let's take, for example, Joey Logano, who we were just talking about. First lap out there, 178.729. His last lap was 173. The lap before that, though, was actually 176 miles per hour. As now 7-time champion Jimmie Johnson, and a guy who has tasted victory lane here at Atlanta Motor Speedway as well, taking his Ally Financial number 48 car. You still want to throw out the Lowe's name. It's going to be a hard thing to do.
One of the other things, and I'm sorry that this is stuck with me, so apologies to Ally, who has jumped into this sport. But somebody said the other day, when I look at that, it looks like it says silly. And then that's all I could see for like part of the race, and then clearly it says Ally. And good for them. You know, they jumped in a big way, Brad. They came on for 2 years sponsoring every race. So he's not going to be hopscotching paint schemes for the next 2 years as he races in the 48 again. And that's nice to see. It's nice to see a company that has that much faith in NASCAR, that, as you said, they're all in for all the races throughout the year. So that's great. Jimmie Johnson, nice run. Brought a car that was just beat to pieces home for a top 10 finish in Daytona.
Yeah, and he brought a lot of cars that were beat to pieces, or caused a lot of cars to get beat to pieces throughout Speed Weeks in Daytona. But, you know, we talk about Jimmie Johnson, who did win the Advance Auto Parts Clash at Daytona. For them, for Ally Financial, now they get to have a whole host of victory lane pictures to be able to show in just their first outing. A lot of people maybe not as happy with Jimmie Johnson at the end of that one, as 17 cars were involved in that big wreck in the Advance Auto Parts Clash. But I look at Jimmie Johnson here recently, and Doug, maybe our opinions differ, maybe they don't. I see a guy who is hungry to win, has the determination to win. I think he has proven to everybody that if he can sniff a victory, he's going to do whatever it takes to do it. The big question is, though, you know, we've seen him get into a car and win a race. We've seen him get into a car and lose a race as well if you go from the Roval to the Clash.
And The one cautionary tale in all this is that 3 times recently that we've talked a lot about Jimmie Johnson is when he has been in accidents.
Right.
And triggered one at the end of the Roval when he and Martin Truex Jr. got into each other, opened up the season, let Ryan Blaney get a gift because he was running way behind in third place that day. And then, of course, the 2 incidents down at Daytona when he got into Kyle Busch and turned him around in one of the qualifying shows, and then of course obviously what happened in the clash. Now, is that a trend? Is that just happenstance? We'll have to see how the rest of the year progresses. And once again, I'll say this: what happened in Daytona doesn't reflect what goes on the rest of the year. I mean, all you've got to do is look back last year at Austin Dillon and Bubba Wallace. Austin wins, Bubba Wallace is finished second. Great stories for both of them. The 3-car back in victory lane at Daytona. Bubba Wallace is star on the rise, and we barely heard from either one of those drivers the rest of the year.
Yeah, it seemed like Richard Childress Racing and Bubba Wallace at Richard Petty Motorsports, another team that has their shop on the campus of Richard Childress Racing in Welcome, North Carolina. Some of them started to show a little more promise late in the year, but a lot of that maybe was also just a little too late. Jimmie Johnson, getting back to him, he's made 7 laps in this practice session. While he's 26 quick, his first lap was 175.927. His most recent lap, 175.265. So in 7 laps, he has barely dropped off about a half a second, maybe just a little more than that. There were some crew chiefs saying that with this package, with more downforce and less horsepower, they might be able to flat-foot it even around Atlanta for about 8 laps, which really surprised me just because we know how much this racetrack, which is now going on its 22nd year, the actual racing surface itself, we know how much it chews up tires, but to think that a driver might be able to go out flat out for 8 laps, that really surprises me. Now, will they? Because it chews up race tires, how much are they going to be doing early on in a run to try and conserve those race tires versus what they end up doing or need to do at the end of the run? And I think a lot of that, Doug, is going to have to do with, if I go faster, can I pass this next car in front of me? If I can't, do I need to try and go faster and maybe save my tires? Now you see Brad Keselowski on the racetrack. He won here at Atlanta Motor Speedway just a couple of years ago, driving that number 2 Autotrader.com Team Penske entry. And Brad Keselowski, for him, went on a great hot streak right at the end of the regular season, the beginning of the playoffs, won at Darlington, won at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a great win for Roger Penske, a 17-time Indy 500 winner car owner, finally got that Brickyard 400 win for him, and then he went on to win the inaugural race, the South Point 400, to kick off the playoffs in 2018 at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Team Penske, the final third of 2018, they were on fire. Ryan Blaney won the Roval. In fact, the only organization to put all of their cars in victory lane in the playoffs, with Brad Keselowski at Vegas, Ryan Blaney at the Roval. Joey Logano picked up a couple of victories, Martinsville Speedway, and, of course, the season finale at Homestead Miami Speedway that took him to the championship. But the other interesting note about Team Penske as well, all of the offseason changes that we saw, either drivers moving to a different team, drivers getting a new crew chief, whatever it might be, Team Penske is the only major organization in the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series that has the same driver-crew chief combo for all of their race teams. And if we could even extend that to Wood Brothers, who has a very tight Penske affiliation, all 4 of those cars coming back with the same driver-crew chief combos.
And, you know, you have 2 drivers now for Penske, 2/3 of their lineup, that have championship trophies sitting on their mantles. Mm-hmm. And Ryan Blaney, a guy that a lot of people label as can't miss. I think this could be the potential breakout year for Ryan. Forget what happened at Daytona. Now the true regular season really starts here today with this qualifying session coming up a little bit later on in practice, and we'll get a better idea. I think the stability that Penske has, the fact that they have solid backing on all 3 of these teams, experience, like you said, with crew chiefs, with car chiefs, and everything else bodes well for that team as we see Kyle Busch get ready to roll out and add a few more laps on his Snickers machine. And by the way, congratulations to Roger Penske, just recently inducted into NASCAR's Hall of Fame. And Brad, when you're around him, it's so impressive, the energy level that this guy has.
Yeah.
I mean, he has done so much. He is one of the few people that I don't want to say I'm intimidated, but I have such respect for him that when I interview him, I'm a little bit tense because
Yeah.
he has just accomplished so much in this game.
And I'm impressed by him. He is the type of person, if you're going to the race shop to visit for a big event, he'll be standing at the front door greeting everybody. He is also one of those people that has the amazing ability to learn and remember people's names. And when he addresses you by name, it makes you feel good. But walking around the Team Penske shop, I was there a few weeks ago, Doug, for an event for Coca-Cola. And just to hear people talk about Roger Penske saying, if there's 400 people or so that work here at this race shop, Roger probably not only knows the names of about 350 of them, he also knows the names of their wives and how many kids they have or their husbands and all of that. The other 50, well, they must be new employees there. I mean, that's what kind of owner that he is and what kind of human being. He really is just an impressive person.
Kyle Busch out on the speedway now, and of course Kyle always a threat to win wherever he goes. He stacked up a couple of victories here at Atlanta Motor Speedway, gave Toyota their first ever win in the Cup Series here at AMS, and he is the one other driver that drives this track a little bit like Kevin Harvick. Tries to get down on the bottom, hook those tires right on that yellow line. Of course, you can do that here since this is just a 1.5 mile track. But he and Harvick have very similar driving styles here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. So don't be surprised to see both of them up toward the front. Of course, I don't think anybody is. They were the two cars last year that between them won the most races. I'm also anxious, Brad, to see, will this new race package that we're unveiling allow some other teams to come to the forefront that we don't hear from as much, or will they at least be able to stay in contact with the leaders more effectively? Because last year, at the end of the race, Kevin Harvick was lapping cars inside the top 10.
Yeah, he was. And when you talk to people about this, most people will say, look, the fast cars are still going to be fast. The cars that were running at the back of the pack, they may still be running at the back of the pack, but the back of the pack might be closer to the front of the pack. More than anything, there's a lot of different things. There is more new here than maybe what we're talking about on the surface. Ford has a new Mustang. We saw Toyota struggle with the 2018 Camry initially when that was introduced in 2017. Big struggles for Chevrolet with the Camaro in 2018. Now people are wondering, well, is Ford going to have the same struggles, or do they have the benefit of watching what Toyota and Chevrolet did? But you add to that more downforce, the 8-inch spoiler, the bigger splitter on the front of it, less horsepower. I think it has the ability to mix things up a little more. How about that?
I think that it might be a bit of an equalizer. We'll see. We saw a brief shot there of Corey Lajoie, who created a stir with his paint scheme down in Daytona. Old Spice people decided to bring it back one more time. And Corey's got some interesting stories to tell about that. He said he went to Disney World. And he goes, I never get recognized as a driver. And he said 4 different people came up to him while he was walking through the Magic Kingdoms, go, you're the guy whose face is on the race car.
Yeah.
And that's the kind, I have got to applaud Old Spice, whoever came up with that idea to do that and take a chance, because it worked. They knocked it out of the park.
Well, the great thing about it, too, I don't know that I could think of anybody in the garage, Doug, more appropriate than Corey Lajoie to have that paint scheme. I mean, Corey Lajoie has like the most amazing beard in the garage, and it works out, has a great smile, and just has the right personality to be able to do that and pull something off. And we were talking to his PR rep, her name's Leanne Egoff, and when we saw them at Daytona, she was like, Corey had this idea to come up with these fans, and like a fan, like, a popsicle stick with the cutout piece of paper of the race car, you could fan yourself off with. And it was like, we got to get some of those. Those became extremely popular in the garage. I know a lot of people, including someone sitting next to me, made sure they got their hands on one.
I got one of the hand fans with Corey Lajoie's face on it, and it's proudly displayed in my man cave right now. And here, once again, Stuart Haas staying busy today. Daniel Suarez back out on the racetrack. Brad Gilley a moment ago said he really liked that paint scheme, and I was going to interject this. I think because that color looks a little bit like Texas Longhorn orange, doesn't it?
I actually never thought about it that way, but
Of course you
hey,
didn't.
I do have a daughter who is graduating UT Law School here in May, and which that makes me a Longhorn by default, by the way. But the Eris paint scheme, it's great to see that he's got such a great supportive sponsor that has moved over with him to Stewart-Haas. And here's the great question, too, Doug. We saw Joey Logano leave Joe Gibbs Racing, and at Joe Gibbs Racing, Joey Logano was like the kid who started there at like 15 years old in their development program. And I think, it's kind of hard to get that stigma off of you. It took him moving to Team Penske for a team to go, okay, this is our guy. We trust him in his confidence. Similar situation here potentially for Daniel Suarez, leaving Joe Gibbs Racing, now coming over to Stewart-Haas Racing. We'll see how well he can do.
I think that this is his chance. I believe he was sort of caught in a purgatory situation last year, Brad.
Yeah.
I just don't think he was ever comfortable. And about halfway through the year, he knew, okay, I'm not coming back. And that I've never been in that situation, but for a young driver that's trying to find his way, that's got to be terrible. Now he's at Stewart-Haas. They produce fast race cars. He's got an opportunity. You've got to make this opportunity work, though.
I agree.
This is a pivotal year, I think, in the career arc for Daniel Suarez. And I believe this young man can be good for the sport. He has a huge following internationally, and he is one of the most charming people when you meet him in person. He has a perma smile. We got a quick glance there of Bubba Wallace out on the racetrack. He, too, carrying a McDonald's paint scheme.
Yeah, and there was actually a group of franchisees that got together to help put this deal together for Bubba Wallace, which is great. In fact, earlier I think we saw an interior shot of Bubba Wallace's car. I thought it might have been the inside of Kyle Larson because both Bubba and Kyle Larson are part of the Coca-Cola Racing family. But, man, what a fantastic-looking paint scheme. And more importantly, how great is it for Bubba Wallace? We know that Richard Petty Motorsports is doing everything they can to try and find sponsorship and help grow their budget on an annual basis to be able to continue to field better race cars as they continue to move forward. So anytime that you see someone supporting a driver out there, I think that's a great thing, and it's really neat that 2 McDonald's cars this weekend now.
Bubba Wallace right now 23rd on the speed charts here as we're rolling along in practice at Atlanta Motor Speedway. A total of 32 cars have posted times. There's a good look at the 43. That's a different look. I kind of like it, though.
Yeah, I like that look quite a bit. So if they start doing Happy Meals in that one, then I'll have to go to McDonald's and grab some Happy Meals. Now I have to just get it for myself. My kids are too old.
Yeah, well, you don't have the excuse. I'm getting this for my kids. Can I have an extra one?
But I'm taking the car.
And Bubba Wallace, who has created quite a stir in this sport now, just needs to have some good days at the racetrack. Brad, I think if this team could come home with top 20 finishes, that would be very satisfying. Obviously, he had a disastrous Daytona 500, getting collected very early on and struggling throughout the day. But if this team could come away with top 20 finishes over the next stretch, I think that represents a big leap forward.
I do too. And, here's what's interesting. Look at him kind of sawing on that steering wheel just a little bit. Now, Atlanta's a pretty rough track as well, and obviously they've got to work to make it happen. But people were thinking that, oh, well, the cars are going to be slower with less horsepower, and they're going to have more downforce and all of that. You know what? These cars are not easier to drive. I think that was a big misconception. In fact, they're carrying more speed through the corners than maybe they ever were before. And even though they have more downforce, it doesn't necessarily make them easier to drive. If the cars are even going to be closer to each other like we expect them to be, that's another thing that's going to make it more difficult. But when you see an in-car shot like we were just seeing of Bubba, to me, that says a lot about how hard they're working inside that race car and what they have to do. And remember, they're going through the corners, at this racetrack at 165 over 170 miles per hour. Think about sawing on the steering wheel doing that. That says a lot about their skills as race car drivers. And now we get to see a great roof cam shot of Chase Elliott, which, by the way, we have 30 minutes left here in this opening practice session for the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series. 10 minutes after Cup practice is over, we've got practice from the NASCAR Xfinity Series. We're going to be covering that here on NASCAR.com from 105 to 155, and we'll have we'll have practice again for the Gander Outdoors Truck Series from 205 to 255. All of those you'll be able to see with us right here on NASCAR.com.
By the way, shout out to Mandy Morris, who's watching today on NASCAR.com, saying enjoying the coverage. We appreciate you watching, Mandy, and all of the other folks. A lot of folks hitting us up on Twitter. If you would like to tweet to us, Brad Gilly is simply at Brad Gilly. Gilly spelled Gillie, and I am at Riceman61, and we will do our best during the break to get a couple of mentions for you a little bit later on as we're watching this practice roll on right now. Chase Elliott, the favorite son of the state of Georgia here, turning in some laps. And I know the speedways are supposed to be unbiased, but Ed Clark and Brandon Hutchinson and the brain trust that run the Atlanta Motor Speedway would love to see that car parked in victory lane when it's all over, because what that does is get the locals fired up, and they're coming back again next year.
Listen, if you run a speedway, you have nothing to do with the competition side of anything. NASCAR takes care of all of that. So if you run a speedway, you have to cheer for your hometown driver. If you're in Atlanta, you've got to cheer for Chase Elliott. If you are Las Vegas Motor Speedway, obviously drivers like Kurt and Kyle Busch. If you're Auto Club Speedway of Southern California, Jimmie Johnson and Kevin Harvick, there is nothing wrong with the speedway openly cheering for their hometown driver.
There's William Byron, this year's Daytona 500 pole sitter. Got his hair cut. Said he did away with the Justin Bieber hair. And this will be the first time he's been on the track today in the Liberty University sponsored car. But when we saw him at Media Day, he had the driver haircut.
He did.
Close on the side, short up on the top. And he said, yeah, I had to lose the Justin Bieber look. So.
Which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
He won that pole for the Daytona 500. And, of course, we have the Busch Pole Award here in NASCAR. William Byron turned 21 years old back in November. And as a Rookie of the Year, he actually got to go to Las Vegas for Champions Week as a 21-year-old, which I'm sure was very nice. But he actually was able to hold the Busch Pole Award flag for his first pole. Had that happened last year during any part of the season, it would have been 21 means 21 or whatever they give to the drivers who are
responsibility.
Under. Yeah, some responsibility. So that is always interesting.
Had somebody tweet us a question a moment ago about this car. And of course, that's Ryan Newman for Roush Racing. Do we think he will make a difference? Ryan is a very talented driver, but you can only do so much. It depends on the kind of cars and how much horsepower and what Roush Fenway puts out on the racetrack for Ryan to go to battle with. He's famous for driving with tenacity, and talked to him recently about it, and I actually told him, I said, you know what? I said, everybody talks about how hard you are to pass.
Yeah.
And I said, good for you, because that's what you're out there for.
Right.
You're supposed to be hard to pass. It's automobile racing. You shouldn't pull over and let somebody go away from you. So I've got to kind of applaud Ryan Newman for that tenacity. I know he aggravates a lot of people. There's Aric Almirola. He is second quickest so far at 179.988 miles per hour in the number 10 Smithfield machine.
Last year, fantastic season. Went to victory lane in the playoff race at Talladega. And this is there are a lot of things that impressed me about Aric Almirola last year and his move to Stewart-Haas Racing. Number one, just that he was a part of the conversation just about every week. But if you go back, Doug, to the end of the Roval at Charlotte, the Roval was the end of round one in the playoffs. We had a three-way tie between drivers who were about to get booted out of playoff contention. It was Almirola, Kyle Larson, and Jimmie Johnson. Three-way tie to see who would not advance to the next round. Aric Almirola and Kyle Larson went on. Jimmie Johnson didn't. But then Aric Almirola, the performance just stepped up and stepped up and stepped up. He ended up finishing fifth in the final standings, the first driver out of the championship four. But now we're in another year with him doing that. So we know what he did in the first year over there. Let's see what he can do in the second year.
And we're watching right now another guy that's a favorite in these parts. He is a native of Georgia, and that's, of course, David Reagan coming out to try to put in a few laps here.
I remember when he won an Xfinity race at Bristol Motor Speedway, and Carl Edwards, I think, had finished second or third. So he came back in the media center as well, and he said, hey, look, when David Reagan comes in here, I'm trying to get a new nickname started, the Unadilla Gorilla, because he's from Unadilla, Georgia. And I think it's somewhat stuck, but not all the way.
Not really.
Yeah.
Got to know David when we went on the NASCAR cruise together.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
And David and I were the only two guys on this entire cruise of 1,500 people. That was the week leading up to the Super Bowl when the Falcons were playing, that were wearing Atlanta Falcons T-shirts.
Yeah, that's true.
We had a bonding moment. Here's Ryan Blaney, the winner last year at the Roval, and this PPG paint scheme, which in my humble opinion, one of the coolest looking paint schemes there is.
I agree.
I just think this car pops off the racetrack.
When they started running the PPG car more recently in Xfinity a couple of years ago, it was somewhat of a similar paint scheme in that the colors were there, and it's one of those that I was wowed by. And as the paint scheme has evolved into what it is now here in the Monster Energy Cup car, it looks fantastic. And if your business is paints, I think you need to have a very really good looking race car like what they have.
All right, by the way, here's Brad Keselowski. We mentioned a moment ago that he is driving in the Auto Trader car. There's also another backstory to this car, too, in the sense that it's carrying the name of a huge group of veterans right now. 140 names of veterans are being honored with this paint scheme this weekend, and it's to help raise money for a couple of different funds. So very worthwhile there, and it's right near below the filler area on this side of the car there where the gas nozzle goes in.
Okay, so lower rear quarter panel
right
down there. That is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Speaking of military and all of that too, Kurt Busch, one thing that he's doing this year, has gotten with Racetracks to give away 100 tickets to all the races to military people. I think that's a great thing. We know that when we get to May and the 60th anniversary of the Coca-Cola 600, it's going to be another great tribute to the military. That's one thing that our sport of NASCAR has always been wonderful about, and it doesn't matter where you are. If you're here in Atlanta, if you're going to be at Las Vegas next weekend, which is right next to Nellis Air Force Base, or Phoenix or Auto Club Speedway, the military presence at our racetrack, and it's not the presence of people here protecting us, it is the people who do protect us who are getting to come to a great NASCAR weekend and really be honored every single weekend, and I think that's just a wonderful thing. Kyle Larson making his way back around the racetrack, and Kyle Larson right now is 15th quick, 177.777 miles per hour, which coincidentally is the exact same time that Ryan Newman has put up as well. But the two Ganassi cars, Kurt Busch, 4th quick in his number 1 Ganassi entry, and Kyle Larson, 15th quick. Not bad for those two drivers. We have 20 minutes left here in this first practice session.
Hard
the
to
opening
believe
practice.
We're already 70 minutes deep into this practice session. This thing is flying by.
This is, and we do appreciate you joining us here on NASCAR.com. This has just been a lot of fun. First time that we're doing this here, covering practices like this on NASCAR.com, and we do thank you for all the feedback on Twitter and for tuning in. And again, we're going to be here for the Xfinity practice, which is going to happen 10 minutes after this session ends. We're going to be here with you again for the opening practice for the Gander Outdoors Truck Series, because it is a triple-header race weekend here at Atlanta. A unique triple-header race weekend, by the way, in that we actually have 2 races tomorrow on Saturday. First, the Xfinity Series race, which will be covered by the Performance Racing Network. You're going to hear all of us here right here on NASCAR.com as well. And then the Gander Outdoors Truck Series race is going to be immediately following that. The Motor Racing Network will have that coverage in a doubleheader race day on Saturday, and then with PRN, we're going to be back on Sunday for the Folds of Honor Quick Trip 500.
Tomorrow is a great day. If you're trying to get introduced to racing, period, if you can get out to Atlanta Motor Speedway tomorrow, the tickets are inexpensive, kids get in free, and you get to see the trucks and you get to see the Xfinity cars, and it's an awesome day, and the weather is supposed to be fantastic. Shout out to Todd Oliver, who says he's enjoying the coverage, listening into his car. Also, Rocket Man 6 fan Nathan says he is really having a good time today following along. So we appreciate that today as we're looking now at Denny Hamlin, 2-time Daytona 500 winner and one of the Coca-Cola Racing family drivers, getting ready to go out back onto the speedway.
Yeah, and now a shot of Ryan Preece. He had an 8th place finish in his debut with JTG Doherty Racing in the Daytona 500 last weekend. And, you know, Ryan Preece, a different kind of driver than A.J. Allmendinger, who was in that car. And it's just a different kind of driver. For Ryan Preece, he is a guy who literally has built and worked on his own race cars his entire life. Several different types, very successful up in New England, running the New England modified cars, but he's run late models. He's run a lot of different types of race cars, but he's also had great success in NASCAR. A couple of years ago said, look, I had a full season here with JD Motorsports and Xfinity. If I'm going to have some money to go run some races, I'm going to go run with a good team. Put together a 2-race deal with Joe Gibbs, was the runner-up and a race winner, ended up expanding that to a 4-race deal. Last year got to run 15 races with JGR, won a big race at Bristol Motor Speedway, and, of course, caught the eye of Jody and Tad Geschecter and Brad Doherty, and they said, why don't you come over here and be a rookie in the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series with us? And if you talk to people at that team, just the different kind of feedback that he can offer has kind of freshened up what they're doing out of their shop in Harrisburg, North Carolina.
I think that team has a shot, and I know you know Brad Doherty really well by working with him on Sirius a good bit, has a chance to, we don't have that category, but to win the most improved trophy. I really see them being able to make a leap this year. They are unified a little bit better. I think they are focused, and I think sometimes, and I'm not dissing on A.J. Allmendinger, I think that team got so myopically focused on the road courses that they lost emphasis when they went to the other 34 racetracks because they knew A.J. Allmendinger was such a difference maker when it came to the road courses. We'll see what happens. Kyle Busch back out onto the speedway once again in the Snickers Toyota as we start to wind down here. So far, much to my chagrin, we have not seen any drafting. And if they're going to do it, Brad, they need to get on it here.
Well, remember, this is practice for qualifying, which is going to happen this afternoon. We go on the air with PRN at 5 o'clock Eastern time. They're not running for the race yet. I've been wondering, okay, with this package, are they going to be drafting and qualifying? And maybe that doesn't happen until next week at Las Vegas when they put the drag ducts on the front of these race cars. Right now they have brake ducts instead. Maybe that's going to be one of the difference makers in this. But we've seen a lot of single car runs. Tomorrow when they go out there and practice, might be a totally different situation. But Kyle Busch, 6th quick on the speed chart. In fact, if we look at the speeds, one driver up over 180 miles per hour, and that's Clint Boyer. Remember, pole speed last year was 184. His teammate, Eric Almirola, 2nd quick. Austin Dillon has had the 3rd fastest lap, followed by Kurt Busch, 4th. The 19 of Martin Truex Jr., 5th quick, followed by his teammate Kyle Busch in 6th. Joey Logano in the 22, 7th quick. Then Daniel Suarez, 8th quick. Denny Hamlin, 9th quick. And 10th quick is Ty Dillon.
And the rest of the top 20 will be Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in 11th. 12th fastest is going to go to Daniel Hemrick. Paul Menard chimes in at 13th. 14th will be Alex Bowman. And then it will be Kyle Larson, 15th quickest. We have 15 minutes left in practice. Ryan Newman comes in at 6th quickest, and then I believe it's going to be David Reagan, followed by Erik Jones, or rather Michael McDowell, followed by Erik Jones, then Brad Keselowski and Ryan Blaney round out your top 20. We got a split screenshot here today. Now, of course, Jimmie Johnson out there in the Ally Financial car, and on the other side, teammate Alex Bowman in the 88. That's a good-looking paint scheme, too.
Those are good-looking paint schemes. And as we look at Jimmie Johnson and Alex Bowman as we were running down the top 20 cars, Jimmie Johnson right now 29th on the speed chart for him. Alex Bowman is 14th quick. But when we look outside of the top 20, Doug, here in these practice speeds, a couple of things that stand out. Kevin Harvick, last year's dominant winner in this race, 26 quick. Jimmie Johnson has just moved up to 21st quick, by the way. They must have that car taped up and doing a true qualifying run. I think we're about to see a lot of change in the scoreboard here as they might be taping these cars up and doing true qualifying runs here in the closing minutes of this practice session. 4 sets of tires is what the Cup teams get for practice. They get 1 set of tires for qualifying, and tomorrow they're actually going to have a final practice session from noon to 1:20. So they only have 2 practice sessions for the Cup cars all weekend long here at Atlanta. Pre-qualifying practice, this 90-minute session, and tomorrow they're going to have an 80-minute session from noon to 1:20 for their final practice. And I have a feeling that they're going to look a lot different, but if they start to tape these cars up, in fact, now you see Joey Logano out there on the racetrack. 7th quick, his top speed, 178.729. Last lap for Joey Logano, 177.954. So, and Joey Logano, the most laps at 25, more than anyone in this session. But got a feeling that maybe Todd Gordon has put him out there on a fresh set of tires if he's able to run that close to his top speed. And, hey, let's see what you can do, because you're going to have to make it through 3 rounds of qualifying if you hope to race for the pole here this afternoon, Doug.
You know, and one other car that is kind of conspicuous by the fact that he's only been out there for 2 laps today, and he's 30th on the speed chart, is your Daytona 500 pole sitter, William Byron. He is mired down in the the 30th spot right now. So we'll see if that is reflective when they go out to qualify here a little bit later on today, because we're running out of time in this practice session.
Well, remember what's different for William Byron this year, Doug? Chad Knaus. And I don't know if you've only made 2 laps in an opening practice session, if there is some Chad Knaus strategy there with a sophomore driver. So I wonder if there has to be something a little bit deeper going on with that number 24 car right now. But we'll have to wait and see. But there's Joey Logano coming in from a qualifying run and looking good.
He has ran some of the fewest laps of the 33 cars that have been out there so far for William Byron. So I'm sure that's all at the behest of Chad Knaus, because I think he runs a pretty taut ship as we're watching qualifying wind down here at Atlanta Motor Speedway, getting ready for the Folds of Honor Quick Trip 500. As out on the speedway right now, we were looking at David Reagan flash down the back stretch here, the other Georgia driver besides Chase Elliott that is in the show here. And we do have to give a shout out to the folks that sponsor this race. There's Folds of Honor, which is a great organization, and the QT Quick Trip folks. Brad, do you want to let our listeners in on the inside story behind the QT?
Well, as you know, Doug, I'm a big personal fan of Quick Trip. And the reason why is, well, there's a couple big reasons. Number one, you go into a QT anywhere, they're clean. Number two, they have styrofoam cups, and that for me
that's a game changer.
That is a big game changer there. Styrofoam cups, Coca-Cola products. In fact, they carry pretty much all of the soft drink products if you want one. But to take it deeper, they've got great food. They just everything they do. I'm a big convenience store fan. All convenience stores and truck stops, I'm a big fan. And QT, Quick Trip, they do it right.
And the media center here at the Atlanta Motor Speedway for the next 3 days, for the benefit of the media, has been converted into a QT.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go in and get roller food, hot dogs, all that. There's a huge pastry section that they keep refurbishing all the time with fresh donuts and bear claws and all those
meats
yummies.
on rollers and
everything.
Yeah,
and then a huge refrigerator with all kind of cold products. So I think everybody in the media corps will probably have gained 5 pounds before they leave Atlanta Motor Speedway this week.
Probably. I just keep looking at, hey, where can I go buy my lottery tickets, and I wouldn't even have to stop on the way back to the hotel.
There you go. That's planning. All right, as we're watching this practice session wind down, just 10 minutes to go. Matt DiBenedetto in the Pro Core Camry out on the racetrack right now. Matt, of course, leading the most laps at the Daytona 500, creating a stir. We talked about William Byron only turning 2 laps. Here he comes back out. And right behind William Byron is Parker Kligerman. Back-to-back Cup races for Parker.
Hey, last week, Parker Kligerman got to have a TRD motor in that Toyota for Gaunt Brothers Racing. That was a great thing for him. And then here's Erik Jones coming out of the garage. All right, start watching the scoreboards here on NASCAR.com, because I have a feeling these cars, we're starting to see that land rush, everyone coming out of the garage right now, probably all taped up. One thing I was thinking about with William Byron, we talked about the limited time on the racetrack. Remember, 4 sets of tires for practice. We know this track chews up the tires. If you're Chad Knaus, wouldn't you want to save all your tires for that final race practice for your driver tomorrow? Just a thought.
Could be part of the strategy. And, of course, when you talk about this track, the description that most drivers give you, cheese grater, because that's the way it chews up these Goodyear tires, and they really, what they do is fall off, meaning the times drop dramatically, sometimes as much as 3 to 4 seconds from one speed to later on in a run.
By the way, if you sit in the lower sections of the grandstands here, when you get home, it might actually look like you were at a dirt track with all the tire rubber that's getting blown around and kicked around here and on your face as well. All right, William Byron making his way out onto the racetrack. Aric Almirola, who is second quick in this session. Aric Almirola, fastest lap earlier, 179.988. Last lap, 179.272. So they're able to come pretty close to replicating what they're doing here as the track has gotten hotter with the sun beating down on it here.
William Byron just jumped up a few spots here, about 8 positions. He was 30th. He is now up to 22nd fastest after this run in the Liberty University machine. He still is a student at Liberty. He takes most of his classes online because he's kind of busy during the week.
Yeah, which is something that actually his sponsor and university does offer to a lot of people, is that online campus. But because he comes across the start-finish line again, the most recent lap now for William Byron, as soon as we get an update on timing and scoring, up again to 21st, 177.158. One of the rarities here at Atlanta that the second lap for a driver was quicker. And, ooh, Erik Jones, you see him slide the nose of that race car a little bit?
Erik Jones also found some speed, Brad. He is up to 6th quickest now with his last lap. As you accurately depicted, they are running more qualifying type laps now after getting these machines a little bit closer to what they'll look like when they do roll out for qualifying later on this afternoon. A reminder coming up here on NASCAR.com, we will have Xfinity practice followed by truck practice. We'll take a 10-minute timeout between those, and then we'll come back with a little bit more coverage as we're watching Ryan Newman come down the front stretch here on the tri-oval at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And there's another good look at Ryan Blaney coming back out onto the racetrack. A lot of teams trying to come in and get their runs in here before the conclusion of this qualifying session, which we're inside the 10-minute window of wrapping it up.
By the way, a lot of Ryans this year. Ryan Newman, Ryan Blaney, Ryan Preece. We can't just say Ryan anymore. Like we could just say Kyle at one point. Now there's 2 good Kyles.
By the way, there's only one Cup driver in the Xfinity race this weekend here at Atlanta Motor Speedway.
And that would be the driver of the 47 Cup car, Ryan Preece, who is going to be running the Xfinity Series. So we're going to be talking about him when Xfinity Series practice kicks off here on NASCAR.com in just a little bit. The Xfinity Series practice session is going to go from 105 to 155, and we're going to have that full coverage for you like we're doing now. And we do appreciate you joining us here. This has been a lot of fun so far doing this for a maiden voyage of covering practices like this here on NASCAR.com in the way that we're doing it, and certainly appreciate things that NASCAR.com has done, including, as we were talking about earlier, covering that test out at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Pretty thrilling to sit and watch that as well.
I watched a lot of that at my desk, by the way. So.
Yeah, I turned the sound down so you wouldn't know, but...
There's Daniel Hemrick out on the racetrack. Debbie Green says, you forgot to talk about Quick Trips. App Steve Gilkey says, okay, you've talked about Happy Meals and Quick Trip. I'm starving. Philip Squires also says, you guys are making me hungry. So here's Austin Dillon, a past winner of the Coca-Cola 600 and
third
the
quick
Daytona 500.
Yeah.
That's a good lap there. He's been quick all day.
Yeah, he really has. And boy, you talk about an economy of laps as well. You look at the top 3. So far, Clint Boyer has done 6 laps. Eric Almirola has done 8. Austin Dillon is on his 7th lap right now. Kurt Busch has only done 7 laps. We've got 5 minutes left. And not Daniel Suarez here. I made the mistake. Martin Truex Jr. in the number 19 at Joe Gibbs Racing. 5th quick. He's only run 6 laps. So not a whole lot of laps run from a lot of drivers. Some drivers like Joey Logano, who's run 26, they spent as much time as they could out there.
Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin seem to be leading the way with the most laps turned so far, and they're up in the mid-20s right now as Austin Dillon now drops off the speed in the Dow-sponsored Chevrolet. Last year, the winner of the Daytona 500, and had a little bit of a resurgence in the last 25% of the season last year.
Yeah.
That car found something. The team found something, and he started running in the top 10 and showed some flashes of speed, I felt like.
Yeah, both he and his then teammate Ryan Newman were kind of the same way. This could be interesting, Doug. Maybe this is a little foreshadowing of what we're going to see. I'm not going to assume or think that it could be, say, Joey Logano or Denny Hamlin in victory lane, but if they are, I have a feeling their crew chiefs are going to be saying, all we did was race practice all weekend long. That's why we spent so many laps in that first practice session, and whoa.
Ryan Blaney's car kicked up. I thought he was going to go up and kiss the wall there for a second. That car got a little bit sideways, and he came out of the throttle there and saved the machine.
Yeah, I think that's one of those that, okay, now I know where the edge is, and luckily I didn't go too far beyond it. But for
got
Ryan,
close to the edge.
Well, and you know what? If that was his qualifying lap, which I can only assume that it was, that probably ruined it. It looks like we're going to get a replay here of exactly what happened as he heads into turn number 3 and 4. And here we go here, right down at the bottom. And now we're back in the garage here. But, man, that had to be a pretty scary thing for him.
By the way, we have the benefit of being able to look at weather radar here inside our production truck, and all of the rain is well to the north of us. So it looks like we're going to be solid throughout the day. The forecast, earlier this week were dreadful, but the weather here today so far at Atlanta Motor Speedway has been nothing but great. Here is Chase Elliott going back out late in practice. We'll see if he puts up a true qualifying run as we're drawing much, much closer to the conclusion conclusion of our first 90-minute practice here for the Cup cars. We'll take a 10-minute timeout and come back with the Xfinity machines rolling off.
Interesting trend here. If you look at on your scoreboard here, if you look at positions 5, 6, 7, that is Joe Gibbs Racing, Martin Truex Jr., you see Erik Jones, then Kyle Busch, and not too far behind them, 10th quick, is Denny Hamlin. All 4 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyotas currently running in the top 10 right now. 2 Stewart-Haas cars at the top of the speed chart, and then you've got an RCR Chevrolet and a Ganassi Racing Chevrolet 3rd and 4th respectively. But right now, Joe Gibbs Racing, while they're not at the top, all 4 in the top 10.
The other car that has not shown speed, but here again, only 2 laps on the racetrack, Kevin Harvick. We saw him come out briefly in the 4 machine, and Brady's only turned 2 laps, and he is 28th right now on the speed charts. That's kind of hard to believe.
You know what, though? Again, I think Rodney Childers, you look at what his strategy is as a crew chief. Kevin Harvick's car has 2 laps on 1 set of tires. They're going to go into practice tomorrow. A 7 or an 80-minute practice session, they're going to almost have 4 full sets of tires.
All right. We're going to take a look back here at Ryan Blaney. So far, this has been an incident-free round of practice, but here's Ryan Blaney in that PPG machine.
Going into turns 1 and 2.
Got
too far. Yeah, a little bit too far below that yellow line there, right. All right, and here now we're back live, by the way, with Ryan Blaney out there. But, yeah, he went a little too far down below that yellow line. And the transition of banking, I mean, it's about 19 degrees difference between the apron and the racetrack. That's a big bump, and I know you felt that before, having driven around Charlotte Motor Speedway a lot. For me, Texas, the same thing. That's a big, big transition.
And the other factor, and these drivers will tell you this, you can see it really well out of this shot, are the seams in the racetrack.
Right.
The drivers don't like to set their tires on those seams because they're uneven. They give a little bit. So if you can run on where there's concrete that's not interrupted by the horizontal seams, you're a little bit better off.
By the way, Denny Hamlin just moved up to 5th quick. So now all 4 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyotas, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Erik Jones, and Kyle Busch. Again, Stewart-Haas Racing are at the top. And practice, we're about to see the black and red flag, which signifies the conclusion of this practice session. The next time the Cup cars will see the track, 5 o'clock this afternoon for qualifying, which we'll be covering that with the Performance Racing Network. You're going to hear it here on NASCAR.com as well. So that's the next time the Cup cars will see the track. Coming up here in 10 minutes, the NASCAR Xfinity Series are going to come out for their first practice session.
All right, we're watching Denny Hamlin roll back into the garage area as we have concluded our first round of Cup practice here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Top 5 fastest cars: Clint Bowyer, Aric Almirola, Austin Dillon, Kurt Busch, and next in line will be Denny Hamlin as that wraps up our practice here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Thanks a lot for tuning in to NASCAR.com.